program to help veterans and military spouses back into the workforce. And so we'll be talking about that today. I just would like to remind everybody that we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like to just pop those in the chat, please feel free to do so. And then at the end of the presentation, we will also be providing you with a number because this does qualify for 1 credit of SHRM recertification. So as I mentioned, I work for Lasalle Network. We are a staffing, recruiting, and culture consulting firm. We've been in the business now for 23 years. We just celebrated that anniversary last year, had continuous growth throughout our time in business. And on the right side of my screen, you can see that we've got several awards that I've listed here for being a best practice to work or best place to work. And that's because a lot of the programming that we offer our employees, one of which is an initiative that we introduced a couple of years ago, and it is called the Lasalle Veteran Network. This is a program that is part of an initiative that we want to help 1,000 veterans in 2021. It's headed up by Director of Operations, Christian Cañas. And so I'd like to introduce you to Christian and have him tell you a little bit more about the program.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Laura. Again, as she mentioned, my name is Christian Cañas. I'm the Director of Operations here at Lasalle Network. I've been here for just over a year now, and I am spearheading our Lasalle Veteran Network. I personally am a U.S. Army combat veteran with the 101st Airborne Division back in 2009 to 2014, with 2 deployments in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. And a little bit about our program. We started this program Veterans Day of last year. And the initiative was to simply help 1,000+ veterans, military spouses, and family caregivers. We knew that because this was a new program and it was an initiative near and dear to my heart and to the leadership of this firm's heart, that we didn't want to accidentally be everything to everyone. We wanted to make sure that we were consistent and we could really make an impact. So we decided to hopefully help 1,000+ veterans, military spouses, and family support members during their job search, interviewing, coaching, mentoring, marketplace analysis, landscape analysis, and if everything could work well, we'd love to also place them with our clients. But at the end of the day, that wasn't the focal point. The focal point was simply to help veterans and their military spouses. So that's a little bit about the Lasalle Veteran Network. Laura?
Thanks, Christian. So why are we all here? Well, there's a couple of people on the call, a couple of different populations that are on the call. We've got employers that are looking to start a veteran hiring program. We have folks on the program or on the call who are already working with this population, and we might actually have some veterans on here who are hoping to learn what employers are looking for. And so we will cover all of that throughout this webinar today. So we know that there are roughly 200,000 service members transitioning out of the military each and every year. And so currently of the 18 million US veterans that are there, we have roughly 11 million that are in the civilian workforce right now. Many of those are actually looking for employment because unfortunately they're underemployed. We've seen this through our Lasalle Network veteran program that we have. We've gone to many career fairs and talked to many programs out there that support veterans. And the common theme has been that many of them are underemployed due to circumstances of maybe somebody just didn't know how to transition their skills into the workforce. Maybe they weren't able to articulate their strengths correctly, whatever it might be. And so that's part of what Lasalle Veteran Network is hoping to help them with. So this graph is interesting. COVID was very hard on everyone, but in particular, the military and military spouse community. So pre-COVID, unemployment rate for this population was roughly around 4%, 3.84%. And then as we got into the midst of COVID, that spiked up to about 11.8% in April of 2020. Part of this is because of, well, not just because of COVID, but of the areas in which some of the military are working. So we know that the pandemic was very hard on certain sectors of the economy, leisure and hospitality being those, as well as the airlines. And those happen to be a couple of areas where industries that hire a great number of veterans. I looked at a list of Forbes top 100 companies that are military friendly. And not surprisingly, a big portion of those are government and defense type companies. But then you look at the IT sector and you've got companies like Intel and CDW that are hiring a large portion of this population. You've also got a large financial industry that looks at this population. I've seen Bank of America on there. Most of the top banks and have a program for the veteran population. So like I said, needless to say, that spiked in April of 2020, started to go back down in unemployment in October of 2020. We saw this at Lasalle as well with all of our jobs that we fill positions for. They were coming back onto the market, which was a good sign. And then in February of 2021, with talks of the vaccination coming out, more and more employers were opening up their doors again and thinking about bringing people back into the marketplace. And I think if you took this out a little further, this graph, and you look to May of 2021, the unemployment rate for this population is hovering right around 4.8, which is slightly below the unemployment rate overall right now. So I think this is a positive thing for this the veterans and the military spouses right now in terms of their candidacy. So how does veteran hiring give a business an advantage? Well, there's a number of different ways that this can happen. Companies that look at hiring this group of people, the community has a very positive image of this when companies reach out to help military spouses and veterans. In addition, this is an area that we want to make sure that as a company we are giving back to. I think that it's also very advantageous if you are looking for diverse populations. So we know that this is a very diverse population overall, even though the number of people that are joining the military has reduced significantly over the past 20 years. The number of diversity in that population has grown by over 30%. We know that there are right now 20% more women in the military. We also know that from a minority population, roughly 36% of the military is a minority population. So if you're looking for adding diversity to your organization, the military is definitely a group that should be tapped into, taken advantage of. Another advantage to hiring this population is a tax credit. So there's a program out there called Returning Heroes Tax Credit. It's short-term unemployment tax credit that companies can take part in if they have an individual who has worked for them for at least 120 hours. You can take a percentage of tax credit for that, up to $2,400. A long-term unemployed employee, you can take a credit of 40% of their first $14,000 in wages, up to $56,000 for a tax credit. There's also another tax group out there, tax program out there, and it's specifically for the Wounded Warrior program. Wounded Warrior individuals are anyone who served from 2001 to present. And that offers a little bit higher tax program. It's 40% up to $9,600 tax credit for anyone who's a part of that program. That gets a little interesting though, to know whether or not somebody is a wounded warrior and whether or not you can take advantage of this tax credit. So I've gotten the question, can I ask somebody if I see that they were in the military before, can I ask them if in fact they are a wounded warrior? Just like any employee, that would not be you can't ask somebody about their disabilities. If the person discloses that they have an injury or a disability, then by all means you can pursue asking them if they're able to share anything more about that, and then you can pursue the tax credit. But for the most part, you should just avoid those questions unless they volunteer that information to you. So again, don't just assume that because somebody was a veteran during 2001 to present that they have some sort of a disability. Diversity. So we mentioned again about the high diversity population for this group. If you look at your diversity programs internally and you want to add the veteran program as part of that, there's a number of different ways that you can reach out to this population. Number of different organizations. I mentioned the Wounded Warriors program. There's also Hiring Our Heroes. There's a group called Bridge My Return. We found these individuals in a number of different areas as well, from chamber events to Department of Labor. So a number of different ways that you can tap into this population. So knowing your role, you as an HR professional, you as a hiring manager, what is your role in this purpose? And it's really going to be more about building the business case for this. So there's a number of ways that you can look at that. Looking at where there might be gaps in your talent pool right now. It said that 80% of CEOs are concerned with the talent gap right now. There are, and that's up from 56% back in 2016. So looking at where your talent gap is, looking at roles that might be suitable for this population, and then building your business case around what type of resources you would have to support this group, what type of training programs do you have, what type of onboarding programs do you have, and really putting that all into more of a strategic plan before you roll out your initiative. In-demand skills right now. These are some of the skills, more of the soft skills that you might not necessarily see on a resume of a veteran, a military veteran, or a military spouse. So if you think about it, professionalism and work ethic, probably not something that they're going to put on their resume. Teamwork and collaboration, communicating effectively, critical thinking, social responsibility. These are things that we commonly see on civilian resumes. A lot of time people will have at the top of their resume an overall professional summary, and they will put all of these soft skills in there. But on military resumes, that's just not the case. And so the best way to identify these skills is really to have more behavioral case interview with the individual. So asking about examples, asking about situations that they were in and how they handled things, as opposed to more of a technical interview. These are going to be able to allow you to pull out these skills that they have and that are necessary in the workforce. But again, not something that if you were to go in and do a search on their resume or do through your applicant track, not your applicant, but your applicant tracking system, that you wouldn't necessarily have these pop up if they were on a military resume. Supporting military families or military spouses. So the fact of the matter is that the spouses, many of these resumes will be very hoppy, if you will. That's a term that they use in the staffing industry. The thing with this is that military spouses have had to follow their husband or wife for their different assignments. And so oftentimes they have short job assignments themselves. They might pick up a role that is not within their field that they were educated in, but it was a job that was available in the location that they were at. And so they might have 3, 4, 5 short-term jobs on their resume that don't look consistent at all, right? So to a recruiter, it might look like the person really doesn't know what they want to do, or they're not very dedicated to a particular job or a particular company, but that's simply not the case. It's the fact that they have had to make these moves and then these transitions in support of their spouse's career. And so I was talking to one woman recently, and she was telling me that, it took a while even to find a job each time they moved, because she would send out resumes in advance. But then the companies that received the resume would say, well, we want you actually physically here before we can interview you. And then once she got to the location, she started the interview process. Well, that took a while. So her time without a job was actually enhanced. And so the one thing about the remote from work and the fact that it's becoming more common is that the hope is that many of these roles will be transportable for these military spouses, and so that they will have more consistency on their resume. But in the meantime, if you are looking at a resume, don't be quick to judge. Again, asking the person for information about what they've done in the past. It's interesting statistic about military spouses is that 85% of them have some form of college education, 25% which have a master's program of some sort. So again, like military veterans, many of these individuals are underemployed, and a pool that you should actually tap into. So as I said, they make up roughly 7% of the population. And unfortunately, 25% of them currently are unemployed. So if you are open to remote work or have moved some of your roles to remote, you might put your job postings out across the United States, not just within your geographic location that you're located in, because you might find that there's more candidate pool out there than you would think. So veterans face a number of different stereotypes and stigmas. I think much of this has been due to what we've seen in television, or what you've seen in movies, or just what media has shared with us, as opposed to what the reality is. And so, according to a recent SHRM report, 90% of the veterans indicated that there were some obstacles in attaining that employment. And I'm sharing this picture right here. This is one of our employees at Lasalle Network. His name is Blake Steele. And Blake spent 4 years with the 101st Airborne Air Assault Division under the 1st Brigade and 2nd Battalion as a 11B infantryman. And during his time there, he was a team leader and developed a lot of in-demand skills such as resilience, team leadership, critical thinking, accountability, administration and logistics, transitioning out of the military despite being really very qualified for many of the roles. Was challenging for Blake. He had sent out over 100 resumes with no response. And so part of it might have been people had a hard time interpreting his resume, wasn't really sure, but it wasn't by lack of hard work and trying to get out there and trying to have somebody take a look at him. He was an explosive canine handler before wanting to make a change into the corporate world. And so we found him, or he found us, through the Wounded Warrior Project. We were doing a webinar for the Wounded Warriors. Blake happened to be on the call. He followed up afterwards and mentioned that he was interested in a role in recruiting that we had open at Lasalle Network. But at the same time, we were just starting this LaSalle Network veteran program, and he was a perfect candidate and a perfect fit for our veteran success coordinator. So he's been knocking it out of the park for us ever since. Super happy to have him on part of the team. He's been a crucial part to helping us roll this out, understanding what the military veteran experience is, and helping us with any of the outreach that we've been doing to many of the organizations that I mentioned. And if you see in that picture there, that is his dog Ace. And so the two of them as a pair go everywhere together. So why would a veteran want to work for your business, right? So like in any interview, you're interviewing the candidate, but they're also interviewing you in a way. So they're looking to see if your company is recognized as a military-friendly organization. And I mentioned that to you earlier, that Forbes has a list of 100 of the top most veteran-friendly companies. And it's a lot about how they advertise, if you will, or they promote what they do for this population of individuals. So is your website, do you have a career page or a web page that's focused on veterans? Do you post jobs out on social media that are specific to veterans? Is your company's brand, does it reinforce the vision and mission? Is your culture inclusive, right? It's one thing to say that, but it's another demonstrate it through blogs and postings and social media and things that you have out there that make it very obvious to people that this is what you do. There's some companies, for instance, Coca-Cola is one, where they actually have specific training programs and onboarding that they do for veterans. They have a mentor program where they will connect the mentor or the veteran with a mentor, either within the organization currently, or maybe somebody who has even retired, just so that they can understand how they became successful at Coke. They have an ERG program, so an employee resource group that's specific to veterans, where they have lunch and learns and things of that nature. So putting a lot of time and energy to make sure that the individual is feeling a part of the community. Again, so talent acquisition, we talked about this. One of the things that you can do is take a look at your job descriptions that you have out there. So for instance, if you have on there that the person needs a minimum of 2 to 3 years of sales experience, a veteran's going to see that and feel that they're not qualified at all and maybe not even apply for the position. Likewise, if you have a recruiter that's going very much by what the job description says and a resume doesn't read that they have 2 to 3 years of experience in sales, that resume might go into the B pile as opposed to the A pile. And that's unfortunate because if it's the person may very well have sales abilities, but it's just not listed that way on their resume. So I'll give you another example. I mentioned that we did some career fairs this year, and I was on a call with an individual, and they were telling me about some of the things that they had done with logistics of making sure that they had the right equipment, they had the right inventory, they had the right procedures in place for a project that they were working on. And I looked at him and I said, it's very similar to an audit. And he said, I don't know anything about audit. And I said, I think you do, you very much do, because what you're doing is inventorying and making sure that things are following compliance and procedures are in place. And that's just very, I could just hear it coming out in all of the stories and examples that he was giving to me, but on paper, he didn't have audit. So there's more and more of that, I think, that's out there if you just let the individual talk more about what they've done from an experience standpoint. Okay, so now that you found the talent, you want to make sure that you do 3 things. You acclimate, you engage, and you retain them. And this is similar like any employee. So I mentioned a little bit about the onboarding process and what does that look like. So in the military, they're very much know what the mission is. They know what the outcome needs to be. They know what the goal is going to be. And so the more clear that you can make that for the individual from the start, the better experience they're going to have from the very beginning, right? So what are their 90-day goals? What does their performance review look like? What type of feedback will they be getting? How often should they meet with their employer or their manager? That might have a lot of structure in your particular organization, or it may not. So just need to figure that out and adapt accordingly. Engaging them within the organization. Again, a lot of military people are very used to team environment, working together on a common goal. So making sure that they are onboarded, they have a team that they're a part of. If your office is set up where you have primarily cubicles and people work very independently, that might not be the best environment for somebody who's used to being out and about and with people who are having conversations and planning together and things of that nature. So think about the space where they're going to be and how they're going to operate within the organization, especially important when so many of us are working remote and we're trying to understand the culture of a company that we're getting involved with. Likewise, whether you're in the office or virtual, very important. And then retaining. So again, in the military, you have a very set career path. So you know exactly what your next step is going to be, when you're going to be promoted or transitioned to. It's very clear and straightforward. Some companies, that's not the case. And so if you can map out what that career path would look like for somebody, it's going to help them have a much better experience. There's a statistic out there that says that veterans tend to stay a minimum of 2.5 years in a role and maybe longer, which is longer than the average civilian, especially recent grads out of college. So again, the more that you can make them a part of the company, the more they're likely to stay. So I wanted to point out that Lasalle Network does have a guide that we put out there. We did research, put together a very extensive, comprehensive guide that has many tools, resources, links, information about how to tap into this population, tips and tricks and how to put together programming for them. And if you just want to scan the QR code, you can download that. I will also provide this presentation to anyone who is on this call, so you will have the opportunity to scan that as well. So right now, I would like to take any questions that people might have. And thanks for coming back on board, Kristen. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Just want to see if there's any questions in our chat box.
So one of the questions that actually came in were whether or not there were certain roles that veterans are more suited for. And it's an interesting question, right? Because all veterans and that whole community has what's called a military occupational code or military occupational specialty, right? A lot of us, present company included, don't necessarily want to continue to do that role, right? But what we are great at is ambiguity, living in the gray, learning a new task and understanding what is needed of me in order to help the team move forward. Right. Of course, there are exceptions, people who are, IT and IT roles who want to stay in IT, human resource professionals who want to stay in HR. But I think by and large, a lot of us can do a lot of things, right? It really is industry agnostic. Me particularly, I leaned into operations, right? As an infantryman, while my specialty would be, being on the front lines, really our specialty was living in the gray, right? Again, like I just mentioned, it's one of those things where we're ambiguous, we can adapt, and we can just do anything that is asked of us.
There's a question that came in, I just saw. Are there specific types of leadership styles that work best for veterans while entering the workforce?
So leadership styles in terms of the employer, right? I think it needs to be a little bit more of an encompassing, engaging environment, all right? And certainly clear and direct communication always helps. And that may not also always be in the veteran community, right? I think we can all appreciate clear and direct communication, but that's what we respond to, right? I mean, if we know exactly what the mission set is and we know exactly what task is asked of us, I mean, we're here to perform and we're here to help the team. Managers that might be also a little bit standoffish perhaps, or people who, assume that you're going to know the role, we can live in that realm too, certainly. I mean, I think we've all experienced that as well, but we do know that making sure that we understand that we're on the same page with our management, leadership, that's the kind of leadership style that we tend to respond best to.
Thanks, Christian. Another question. What are some things you should ask in an interview? Are there questions you should avoid?
Sure. I think, to no surprise to anybody, there are some questions that you tend not to want to ask a veteran. Not to put too fine a point on it, sometimes if you blatantly ask someone if they've been deployed and they hadn't been deployed, they could look at that as, are you only going to take me if I've been a deployed combat veteran? Some other questions are to refrain from asking, do you have any kind of mental disorders or anything like that? I mean, I'm sure the folks on this call know that is an inappropriate question regardless, but certainly do not ask any of those questions. There seems to sometimes be an assumption that we as a community are hard, fast chargers that have no room for excuses, right? Asking us a better way to kind of pose that to veterans of this community is what kind of leadership style we might have, right? What kind of leader we are, how we communicate to our subordinates and to our fellow team members. Asking someone or assuming, were you engaged in actual ground combat? Did you have to do something you were ever uncomfortable with doing? Any of those kind of questions are pretty inappropriate to ask this particular community.
Great. Let's see another question that came in. And we touched on this a little bit. And it's, what can attract veterans to apply for your open positions? How can you find veteran talent to recruit?
So one of the things to help attract veteran talents, quite frankly, is to just be involved in the veteran community. There is a myriad of veteran communities across LinkedIn, Facebook, nonprofits, government-run organizations such as the Military Spouse Employment Program run by the DoD, Hiring Our Heroes. You can even set up an internship that will attract a veteran specifically through SkillBridge. There is no limit to the amount of resources that you can go into. And within those resources, you can actually, put jobs up, right? Some of those resources require some kind of a donation as they are nonprofits. Others are more than willing to have you put into a job board any kind of recs that you might need filled. But by and large, the first place to do is to do a little bit more research, right? Double check some of these communities within LinkedIn and Facebook. They have very, very active communities, specifically within Facebook, right? That's how you're going to attract top talent, and that's how you're going to get them within your organization.
Great, thanks. Another question, are there military positions that involve data science?
Absolutely. In fact, our technology department here at Lasalle Network has been placing folks in data science across the entire country. Data science is very, very hot, and we don't see that market letting up anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. The other thing that I've noticed that companies are talking about quite frequently is upskilling talent. And so there's a lot of programming out there that can help people upskill very quickly. So if there's a area that, again, we talked about a skill gap that you have, and you've got the veteran who's got everything that you need that you're looking for in terms of the communication, the problem solving, and the change management experience, but maybe he just needs to be upskilled in a certain type of IT. They're very, very trainable, and that can happen very quickly. There are a lot of military-friendly universities out there that allow military service individuals to obtain go to college and obtain degrees while they're in the military. So you have people coming out with either part or all of a type of a skill or a certification or a degree. And so I think that's something else to think about, that in these times, many people are training people very quickly because we're experiencing problems that we've never seen before, right? And nobody's had to deal with. And so many of them are creating jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Correct. Correct. And in that same vein, too, I think that it's important as hiring managers and as companies that we perhaps look at the holistic resume of the veteran. If I could use myself as an example, I still had to finish 2 years of college when I got back into the workforce, right? And my previous employer understood that I'm bringing a skill set that perhaps someone who has recently graduated college doesn't have yet. Right. But I do have some of those soft skills and leadership skill set wherein that was able to kind of counterbalance the fact that I didn't have my undergraduate degree yet. And at the same time, while I was working full time, I was able to get my undergraduate and graduate degree at night. So it ended up evening out. But that consideration that individuals are trying to train up, let's call it with a traditional university while they use their GI Bill, or a specific task, right, or a specific set of skills like being an electrician or trying to get into the IT field. I think it's very, very important that we look at the holistic individual, the holistic resume, in order to benefit your organization and the veteran community as well.
Yeah. Okay. Not seeing, just looking. Are there certain roles veterans tend to be best suited for?
Similar to my earlier response, it tends to be anything that the individual wants to do or has a passion to learn and to do, right? Again, apart from specific roles that require, like an HR certification that they may or may not have received during training, a lot of roles, again, present company included, tend to be operational roles, right? We can live in the gray. We can understand moving into different departments quickly. We understand how that we need to be a little bit more team-oriented versus single task-oriented as well. So I've seen a lot of success in the operational world.
Great, thanks, Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, if not, as I said, we will provide this presentation to everyone who's attended. And we will also provide you with the SHRM certification. If anyone would like to get in touch with Christian or myself, we will provide that as well. But I am Laura Bellis, lbellis@lasallenetwork.com. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate your time.